Good morning. Welcome back to Morning Express. It is the 4th day of February, Wednesday, and it is time for the newsroom. We're looking at some of the stories we've been airing, you've been reading about, hearing how those were covered by the media, but also some of the issues facing journalists around the world. So do talk to us as well as we engaged our guest this morning. Joining us in studio, we had him earlier on our press review, Geoffrey Musoku. He is a political reporter with the Standard, may I add, senior political reporter with the Standard newspaper. And the middle, joining us for the first time on the show, is Alois Lentoimanga, he's a member of Parliament, Samburu North, and Patrick Gadara, who's a communications consultant. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's begin with what we witnessed over the weekend. I think beginning Friday was the African Union Summit over in Addis Ababa, and one of the issues that took center stage was the African Court of Justice. Of course, the Kenyan delegation very much involved in lobbying for signatures. I think managing to get about 12. They're yet to get to 14, but confident on the same. But since then, a lot of analysis has gone into this. And I'll begin with you, Member of Parliament. And as far as watching this particular story, have all the avenues by the media been brought out? And as far as, yes, on one hand, there's a narrative that these leaders want out there, which is the African Court of Justice needs to be put in place to ensure that Africans take care of their own challenges and issues. But on the other hand, have questions such as, why not sort out the mess that's perceived to be in the ICC so that that then continues to function? Or on the other hand, why not fix that division in the local systems in each of the countries? That's the international division of this kind of crimes in local systems to work. Or is the media just simply running with this, or are we looking at it 360?
I think, in my view, the Court of Justice in Africa is important for us because we view the ICC as a political court. So although the media has covered it well, to me it has covered well, and we think that we should Africans should handle their own issues here at home rather than depending on a foreign court.
All right, Gadara?
Well, I have a few issues with how the whole AU summit was covered. If we recall, especially actually even on KTN, there was an announcement that the Africans had set up a court, the African Union had set up a court, which actually wasn't the case. This court, the African Court of Justice, is yet to be established. The protocol to establish it and to merge it with the Court on People's Rights, which will then create the Court of Justice and Human Rights. That's the Malabo protocol that Kenya was pushing, was signed last year. So it wasn't a court that was created by this session. So I think that was one of the first things the coverage needed to be more clear about. When it comes to the Malabo protocol itself, I mean, there has been a bit of a controversy, I think, or differing points of view, depends on who you believe. The East African reported that only Kenya has signed it. And then yesterday, I think, the Foreign Affairs CS comes out, says there's another 11 countries that have signed it. I didn't see anybody ask who are these 11 countries. When did they actually sign it? Because nobody else has spoken to seems aware that there are other countries that have been signing this. So it would be good for media to not just take government's word for it, but to actually go out and confirm it. Who are these? It would be nice for us to know who's in the same boat as our government. The third thing goes to what Mheshimiwa here has been saying. I think the issue of complementarity has to be discussed. And it's not just complementarity with local institutions, but also complementarity with the ICC. We are signatories to the ICC, 34 countries. It's not true, again, as was reported by KTN, that the AU summit voted to pull Africa out of the ICC. That's manufacturing news. It didn't happen. You know, Robert Mugabe, who's the chairman now, says when they met up in June in South Africa, that should be on the agenda. But it hasn't happened yet. You know, and there are many voices within the AU that are resisting the idea that we should pull out of the ICC. You know, the idea that the ICC is itself a foreign court, I find, let's say, disingenuous. Two reasons. First, one of the major reasons they give is that the ICC is foreign funded, or is funded mostly by the West. Well, the AU itself is foreign funded. It gets more than 60% of its revenue from the West and from China. You know, does that make it a tool of the West? You know, so there are questions that are now being asked. The second thing about the Malabo Protocol is that it specifically immunizes senior government officials from prosecution. Yet across the continent, it is senior government officials that commit or accuse of committing the worst crimes. It's governments that are killing their own people. You know, so if we sit back and we say, well, we're going to form a court for the specific reason that our leaders are not going to be charged, then we're missing out on a huge chunk of the very people who commit these crimes. You know, it is not about justice. You know, in my reading, the Africa Court of Justice and Human Rights would be a really good idea, you know, if it was made part of the international system. You know, so that you've got a hierarchy from local justice institutions to a continental one to an international one, and that they work together.
Okay.
But this is being set up essentially to provide immunity. You know, and they haven't been shy about saying this, to provide immunity to leaders sitting in office. And remember, African leaders, a lot of them tend to stay on in office. This will simply incentivize them more. You know, if they think, if I get out, I'm going to be charged, you'll have many more changing constitutions refusing to step down, you know.
Okay.
All
right. Yeah, as you respond to that, and also touch on Geoffrey, the fact that, you know, he's broken down some of what the Malabo Protocol entails, what it in essence means going forward. But a lot of journalists are simply quoting it, you know, news pieces on the papers. But many people, it's just that Malabo Protocol, but without understanding of what that in actual fact would mean.
Just first to start from where you stopped, the issue of not only insulating or protecting African leaders from going to court. One thing in the Malabo agreement is that a sitting president, not a sitting president, that those Africans who are seen to be wanting to take power through unconstitutional means. It's one of the. It's a clever way of probably these sitting African heads of state will keep off. Like if you remember the issue of Ivory Coast, where elections are held, so incumbent refuses to hand over power, and then there's a crisis until the international community has to come in and ensure they win. So if we had that African Court of Justice, probably the current president of Ivory Coast will be in that court for trying to take power through unconstitutional means. You saw what Mugabe did until they had to sign power. Of course, even as here in Kenya, we have had that situation in 2008. That is one thing. Probably the media we've not covered, not just the issue of what is contained in the Malabo agreement, but it's like we pick what probably the government tells us. For instance, the Kenyan delegation had so many journalists accompanying the Kenyan delegation, of course, knowing that AU was going to sign a treaty to form this court. But then what transpired, I spoke to one of our colleagues who was in Addis and says what transpired is that countries, especially from West Africa, in fact led by Nigeria, was the one leading the anti-that court campaign. But you know, for us probably, because maybe we don't want to wrap the shoulders the wrong way, we had to say Kenya's pledged this amount of money for the establishment of the court, which is yet to be agreed upon. So the issues, the underlying issues of testing up of that court were not brought out clearly.
Again, there's one thing we need to get clear here. The agreement, the protocol for the court which is the African Court of Justice and Human Rights, has already been signed. What the Malabo Protocol does is to expand its jurisdiction to cover international crimes. That has been agreed on, as per last year by the summit. The question is who has signed up to it.
Why are we not bringing out those issues in as far as which countries exactly, who is against, why are they against? Because journalists, as you said, were there with all of these people. I mean, to get interviews, we should have brought out a full picture. We are simply, actually, looking at it from the face of it, journalists would have just stuck back here and had perhaps the government officials reporting on what they were doing.
That's the problem, especially when you're traveling to a certain country to cover events like the AU, where you rely on official information given from.
But they're there with these other countries, Mosoko. They're not relying. You see, they're not back here. They're in Addis with all these other parties.
You know what happens in covering such AU conferences is that there are side meetings, there are lopings. There's the Ministerial Council of Ministers meeting, which is ahead of the head of state of meeting. That's when the agenda is agreed. So at night, there's a lot of loping. There are meetings taking place. People are trying to see how can we push our agenda. So what happened? The real story is not the resolution is read to you. It's not the presentations at the plenary. It's what happened last night. So what happens, unless you have sources, especially now, if you are coming from Kenya, your sources are government minister and the PS who are in that meeting at night, they cannot give you the truth. Unless now you are well connected, that's why the international media sometimes beats us, because you see the international media probably has sources from 5 countries, foreign ministers from 5 countries, so that international journalists will be able to get the real story of what transpired the night before what was read at the plenary. So as what we report is what has been said at the plenary and the resolution which I read.
Which is sad. I think that prior to us heading, we shouldn't be covering just the summit, the fact that leaders met. It's the issues that are behind it. Those issues are running, way before the summit starts. If our journalists were actually interested in finding out what Mauritania thinks, what Angola thinks, these are things that have been discussed, and it's phone calls that you can make prior to the summit. But we don't. We just turn up at the summit, regurgitate what we are told, and then present that as news. It's not contextualized, as you asked. What are the issues? Who's opposing it? Why are they opposing it? One last thing I'll ask, and I'd like Mheshimiwa to answer this. In the context of the Malabo Protocol, the protection that it gives to, especially to sitting heads of state, it's very rare. In fact, I've yet to come across a case where our journalists ask about the provision in our constitution that says that the president can be prosecuted. And my question is this: what is the goal? What is the thinking behind this? Is that the presidency should not be a shield, especially when it comes to grave crimes, international crimes. And people are here arguing as if it is counter the Kenyan constitution to prosecute the president. It is not. The constitution is clear, 143 subsection 4. The president can be prosecuted. And what's happening is our government is going around that clause. It doesn't mention it. Our media doesn't mention it. It's as if it doesn't exist. It's going around it. It goes from the AU to the UN to argue that there's something wrong with Kenyatta and Ruto being prosecuted. Yet our constitution specifically allows for it.
First of all, I want to say that, as he had indicated earlier, that the summits points are always agreed earlier on. So because the summit is so short, it's a very short session. So most of these issues that are put on the table are sort of agreed maybe a day before, or even maybe 2 days before. Through those other meetings are done by which are done by the Ministerial Council. Secondly, the ICC issue and the issue of wanting to have a court of justice for Africa actually is more critical to us than any other country. Why? Why do I say this? Because already we had a president in the ICC, our own president. and then now it has been that prosecution has failed. We still have a deputy president. These two figures are symbol of unity in this country. It is in the constitution. They are the symbol of unity. We sort of feel ashamed if our own president or deputy president is put in a court in a foreign land. Yet we are saying here is a symbol of unity. So in
why did Kenya sign up to that? Because no one forced Kenya
maybe they never foresaw that it was going to
but
come.
Don't we have,
but secondly, let me
in
finish.
our constitution, 143.4, the president can be prosecuted.
And they are
nothing to
innocent
say.
until proven guilty. So what you're talking about is just an issue.
Yeah, but I'm saying
it looks bad, but this is a process.
What I'm saying is that we have interest as a country because of one of our own, our presidency, our deputy president is there. So the issue is, we would have done this, we would have avoided this from the beginning. For example, if we would have constituted a tribunal, it has been said for a long time, even through the newspapers, that a tribunal, Parliament made a mistake, the 10th Parliament made a mistake by allowing our people to be taken to, not only the president, even our Kenyans, because we need to have a very fair justice system here in this country, so that we can handle our issues here at home.
All right, we'll move from that.
I'm sorry, you haven't addressed what 143 subsection 4 of the Constitution says.
And Ghana, I want to focus on media issues because that takes us to a conversation on ICC. I specifically want to look at our coverage. But that's a legitimate question. Why is the media not bringing that out? That at the end of the day, well, there's a campaign, in these other forums to establish institutions that would make us not look bad, as the Mheshimiwa says. Why are we not saying that our law allows for that?
I think, let me start by acknowledging that like all other institutions, we have our weaknesses. And let me accept that it is true as the media. We have failed in terms of bringing, even as we go out there and publish stories and broadcast about Kenya's positions, Kenya's push. You remember Kenya's push at not just at the AU, we even had to the Security Council. Kenya failed to garner the requisite numbers to probably to postpone the case against the president and the deputy president. I don't know whether I call it a silent conspiracy to hide the truth from we members of the fourth estate, because that is the truth out there.
That's a harsh indictment.
I'll say, because the Constitution of Kenya says, of course, the president cannot be charged in a court of law here. But
is it a conspiracy or is it laziness? That someone will just choose to report a story as is instead of delving into a full...
It can't be laziness. I don't know what I call it laziness.
So who's conspiring with whom?
Maybe we, I don't know what, probably we in the fourth estate, I don't know what we are in pointing out, because obviously we cover forums where even civil society, even other members of parliament, the divergent opinion say the constitution says this, but this is what you are telling us, and then the next day probably those voices are not coming out. So I should say, I'm not saying that we are guilty of this, but I'm saying probably it's, I don't know the best term to use and say we fail on this one, because these are things which are clear, black and white, they're in the law. So we should be able to say, this is Kenya's position, this is the government of Kenya's position, but this is what
the Constitution says.
All right, let's move on to another story, gentlemen. And the documentary aired in NTV, Nairobi Aviation College, Certificates of Doom, has been a topic of discussion on social media. A lot of criticism. We had Robert Alai here yesterday, one of those who have harshly criticized this piece, saying that it was one-sided, that focus was a witch hunt, pretty much. That's what he described it as. Watching it, did you get that same view? Did you hold the same view?
Well, I watched the expose itself, which I thought was an actual good job showing the wrongs that went on at the aviation college. We had people registering. I don't think this is a dispute that people were being registered when they they claimed they couldn't even write, and actually went ahead to attend classes. We had people being filmed, procuring certificates without ever attending college. I watched Alai's interview with you yesterday, which seems to me, he seems to be arguing that simply focusing on NAC is wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's incomplete. Yes, he has a point in the sense that this is widespread, but that doesn't mean we should ignore the fact that it's actually happening at a particular college. But that said, there has been several aspects to this that I think have caused me a bit of a concern. Not so much the story itself, but what came after. There has been charges, as Alai was saying yesterday, that there was a court order issued to stop this being aired. It can't be very hard for media houses to find out whether a court order was actually issued. And it very much seems to me as if media houses are sitting back and waiting for NTV and Alai to fight it out amongst themselves instead of going in and investigating this. A journalist should be going out, interviewing people at NAC. Was there, wasn't there a court order? Are these things for real? So that we, instead of us getting this he said, she said sort of reporting, now people are just able to go in and try and establish what are the actual facts on the ground. Was the Nation Media Group, for example, remiss in not obeying a court order? This can't be hard to find out. But for us to sit and in a situation where Alai says, and this guy says,
if in fact there was a court order issued, then wouldn't the person who'd moved to court to have that given out have then, after it aired, gone back and got an action to have arrests made? Then doesn't that also just poke holes into the whole question of that?
True. I don't think, for me, at least as far as the press coverage of the same is concerned, we should be arguing that because NAC didn't go back to court to ask for arrest in the NMG, therefore there was no court order issued. It is not hard to find out this. A court order is a public document. These guys say they have it. Has anybody from the KTN, for example, wandered down to NAC, said, spoken to their management, where is a copy of this court order? Or are they like us getting stuff off the internet that Alai has put up? What is it? Instead of our media going out and finding out and establishing the truth, they seem to be very much in the situation of the Kawa citizen, who sits back, expects you guys to do it, but you're also Googling it on the web and stuff, and essentially simply saying one guy says this, the other guy says this, without finding out what is the actual position here.
Okay. Member of Parliament, do you hold the same view as Sam, that in exposing some of the ills in society, that focusing on one particular ill or aspect of it would be unfair, as opposed to some would argue there needs to be more examples of where systems are not working as they should?
Yeah, I think this issue of you are talking about court order, or no, they're trying to actually ascertain the truth. Court orders are easy to get. Even you can even go to the court and buy a copy. They will normally sell. Not really a court order, but the
verdict. You can buy a
verdict.
court order?
The verdict. If you go to the court, you can get a copy. You can get a copy with a fee, revenue. You pay revenue for. I'm talking about the verdict, the judgment. I don't know about the court order, but it's not hard to get one if you.
It's not difficult.
Yeah, it's not difficult.
And my point is, I think that the media is more focused on this clash between Alai and the media house and on the issues behind it. I'm looking at the wider thing. It is true that this is something that's happening, as Alai was pointing out yesterday, that you do have.
Yeah, he said he taught as a postgraduate lecturer.
Yeah, and if you look, and this even KTN, I think there's a show you had last year, I believe, or that went into this, that looked at how, for example, the ads that you have, in colleges where people are doing research for students, they're doing data analysis, essentially they're outsourcing their learning to other people. So we need to look at this, I think, more holistically in terms of how the entire education system itself has failed. It's failing at almost every level you look at, but we don't talk about that,
Really, Gadara, because you say this, I have a problem with when you say holistic, because I imagine that would be suggesting a piece with every little issue under the sun in Kenya as far as education is concerned. That's impossible for it even to make sense to a viewer in terms of compilation and for it to be a good piece that has impact. Mosoko.
This one narrowed down to one institution, that's Nairobi Fishing College. But probably what Gadara is trying to say is that we in the media, we need to go out there and cover all aspects of, if it's college education, if indeed people are buying certificates of doom, is it only happening in Nairobi Fishing? Is it happening in other colleges?
So you're saying the story should have had more colleges?
No, I'm not saying that, because this was an expose probably. He had invested in one institution where he had enough material. Don't just do a story because you've heard rumors. If you have sufficient material, you believe that the material you're going to get is authentic, is credible, then you can narrow on one institution. But then now, probably we as the media, to use that one, we should now do a follow-up. Even go to the Council for Higher Education, the Ministry of Education, tell us, before we even, the media, we expose these things as an irregulatory institutions, do you have any complaints to that effect? And if so, who are the culprits? So that we are not seen to be targeting one specific individual. But the feeling out there is that these things are happening. They are widespread. They might not be happening only in, and probably it's not like, say, Nairobi Aviation, the officials of Nairobi Aviation accept it, but probably a cartel within the college can be doing that. You have a parallel system within even an institution doing that. So whenever they are exposed, you cannot say the media is malicious. The media is just targeting, it's being used to finish somebody. These are the issues, as long as you have material, because watching from that expose, the guy, the reporter had his material, had his information. And therefore, before we vilify him, it's important that we acknowledge that these issues are there. The allegations have always been there. And we need now, as we in the media now, we all need to dig deeper into it and get to the bottom of it.
I want to say something that unlike before, unlike maybe 20 years ago, education in Kenya was like controlled. It was like closed. 20 years later, it is so competitive now. It is like liberalized. All manners of institutions are coming up in the name of offering education. Diploma, university. I think we have opened all this, and it's for the benefit of Kenyans. Before people were yearning to go to abroad. It was so difficult to get to go to institution. But coming to that from that background now, because it's like the way churches are doing. Churches are all over the place.
So which is why I was asking.
What I'm saying is that the media should start by, first of all, establishing this institution, like this aviation, is registered under which organization. Start from there. Is it the Ministry of Education?
Did you watch the expose? Because those details are in the expose.
Oh, they are there?
Yes.
So what I'm saying, let me finish. So in that case, you can go even another level and do some, I don't know whether they did you can also go and buy those